What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here. We're repping America, the center, and common sense. Boy, have we seen a lack of common sense lately. We got a lot to do today, so let's get the show popping. But first, let me wish everybody out there happy Pride Month. There you go. All right, we're just going to kick this off with some crazy ones. You know what the big story of the week was. We'll get to it. Libertarian Party nominates giant gay pong. I wish the Libertarians were the answer, but I don't feel like they really are. I love that bong. Man, I want that. Let me... Right off the bat, right to a tangent. Let me just say, if you didn't like that, I wish people a happy Pride Month. Go F yourself. Get out of here. Okay? That's settled, man. People have the right to be who they are, man. Look at me. I might be a straight white male, but I'm weird. That's what makes America great, man, is that we could be a weird country, man. But back to what I was saying. The Libertarians, hey, if it's the Libertarians that become the third party, I'm totally cool with that. But I don't think that they are the answer. One reason why I think Purple State is the answer is that Purple State is not a version of the red or the blue. It's looking at the red or the blue over 50 years now. I started out a Democrat. I started out as one of those people who would be protesting on campus for Palestine. I started out as that. And I matured into a little bit more of a conservative, but there's a lot of values that conservatives and I disagree on. And one of them is, gays. Gays getting married, things like that, discrimination, hatred of. I disagree with a lot of that stuff. But Purple State at its core is about taking the good ideas. In fact, the ideas that we could look at history and see have worked, and using those, whether they're Republican-inspired or Democrat-inspired. A lot of these parties, Green parties, Libertarians, they're offshoots of one of the other parties. And I don't think that's really the way to be, If the gays can have rights, we can have rights, guns can have rights, gays can have rights. That's America. We have rights. And we need to get back to focusing on that because we are slowly giving away a lot of our rights. This is just freaking funny. The Washington Commanders, formerly the Washington Redskins, got sold. And the new owner said that they're keeping the Commanders' name for now. And on X, Michael Carlson calling a team in D.C. the Commies was a stroke of Snyder genius. Yeah. Nobody was offended by the Redskins name, folks. Nobody was. A lot of people like to label these sports teams as being insensitive. But when you talk to the people who make up those different groups, it's representation. One of my favorite stories is about how white, privileged, fragile Americans thought that Speedy Gonzalez and Slowpoke Rodriguez were offensive, so they removed them. And the Hispanic culture was outraged because that was their representation. That was a Hispanic character on a popular cartoon. It wasn't offensive. We should be allowed to poke fun at things that we find funny. And that's just the way it is. If you want to make a joke about a taco, make a joke about about mayonnaise. Be fair about it. And that's what is being lost here in America, is the fact that a team like the Redskins has to be changed to the Commanders, which doesn't really sound much better. Speaking of things that don't sound better, Biden wanted to show his support for Gaza to placate his voters. So he had our military build a pier. Well, to save time, Biden to drop the next $320 million in cash directly into the ocean. The Gaza Pier has floated away. It was built basically in the open ocean. It wasn't built in a harbor. There's a reason why bays and cities that have like rivers or whatever accessing the ocean tend to be big. London, San Francisco, just a few of them. I mean, there's bays all over the place, but whatever. But this shows the way that particularly the Democrats are acting right now, where they're blindly just going along with things to placate voters, and it just turns into a fucking mess. We're going to see some more examples of that. But the Gaza Pier, you know, we could have just airdropped. But see, what was funny was in the early days of the conflict over there, we did an airdrop. And somebody was killed when one of the packages, the parachute, I believe, failed to deploy and crushed somebody. So immediately, that was a bad optic. So they're like, no, we can't do that. Well, for the money that Biden spent on this stupid pier, it could have been achieved for a lot cheaper simply doing airdrops. And that's what I was saying in the beginning. Let's look at the things that work and do those things. Because right now, I believe that this country and even the world is kind of teetering on an edge. And I think right now is a time for a rational approach to things. But good old-fashioned clickbait and the media's need to make money off of us supersedes that. And politicians trying to get votes. You know, this is both funny to me and very alarming. Fauci says no evidence for pandemic guidance on masking or social distancing. He reviewed no scientific evidence for his recommendations. We damaged the future of children with no actual evidence to show that any of it was required, needed, or worked. And as COVID continues on in this country, we see that we never were going to stop it. We were never going to stop it. I said it in the early days. It was like D-Day. Nobody wore a bulletproof vest. Fine, wear a mask. I was visiting my mom in a convalescent hospital. You know, they had a COVID outbreak. I barely wore a mask. But, you know, I sat in a room. It's just bizarre to me. I sat in a room with some of my family and some of the doctors, and everybody was wearing masks except me. And I just thought to myself, like, I'm not doing it out of some sort of defiance. I'm doing it out of the fact that I ain't scared of it. I'm just not. Even if that's what takes me out, I'm not scared of it. I don't live my life in fear. But then Fauci, in this testimony, where he basically said, hey, I did all this shit and I had no evidence. Now he's bemoaning how freedom of speech made it harder to censor people who demonized him. Look, a lot of us didn't buy what was going on, and we wanted to say it. And the capper to this whole story is that while many American workers and businesses suffered financially, in part because of the COVID-19 pandemic policies that Fauci imposed, Fauci and his wife's net worth expanded by $5 million during that period. He made money doing what he did. And what was saved, we don't even have a clear picture of that. Much like we're going to talk about the Trump trial, but much like the Trump trial, a lot of what went on during the pandemic was smoke and mirrors, and it was clouding, it was murky, making the waters murky. We don't really know. If they were listing people who died in motorcycle accidents but happened to have COVID as COVID deaths, we don't know what the true cost was. And what's really weird is back then, I remember thinking, well, it must be bad because we're seeing these kind of numbers sort of worldwide. But since then, I've realized that what's really going on with the neo-Marxists, the far left, is that it's a worldwide effort. They want a new world order. They want one world. They want to be ruled by somebody who can circumnavigate the Constitution. Free speech is fundamental to this country. This guy, whatever. So, again, it's June, Pride Month. Hamas announces Pride Month kickoff party on the roof of a very tall hotel. That's who people are supporting when they support Palestine. Hamas is made up of Palestinians who govern Palestinians. All right? When I speak pretty soon here about Trump, people are going to say that I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, right? Because I vote for somebody, I'm tied to them. Well, those same rules apply here, folks. I just love the insanity of this because in the back of my mind, I really actually thought this was going to happen. Recently, there's been a lot of air turbulence stories in the news. One resulted in a man dying of a heart attack. It's always hard to say if that was really a result because, if you stress out and have a heart attack, any amount of stress will kill you, I think. But I'm digressing. I'm getting better. But Buttigieg, just like I thought, came out and linked the turbulence to climate change. Yeah, right there. He was on Face the Nation, CBS's Face the Nation. Watched and quoted by lots of people. And he claimed the effects of climate change are to blame for recent incidents of severe turbulence on airplanes and extreme weather. See, they have this figured out. Because of Earth wobbles, moving closer to the sun, the impact of Mars, our climate is changing. Very hard to argue that. The causes are what we argue. But again, the climate's changing, so they latch onto it because the climate's not necessarily warming or cooling like they used to like to say. We're not running out of oil like they used to say. So now they finally hit upon the one inarguable fact. The climate's changing, much like it always has. And one more, just because it tickled my fancy. As civil war consumes Black Lives Matter, $8.7 million goes missing. We're going to skip through some of this. There's a lot of money that was being raised, money that was given here, discrepancies, trying to avoid taxes. That was just awesome. We're just going to go through this right here. Put simply, the millions of dollars that Tides Foundation sent to One Life Global to help Black Lives Matter grassroots support local chapters fell into an accounting black hole. 8.7 million. Wow. And these are people who oppose fascism. These are people who blame capitalism for racism. And yet they're just absconding with the money. Look how money hungry they are. They did deferred. I didn't know this week was going to blow up, so I had a lot more stuff planned to talk about on this to kind of go through it. But you have charities that are deferring revenues, in which case people are saying this is not something that's normal. You don't defer them. Like right here, nonprofit tax attorney Jessica, I can't pronounce that, Bartlett. It is highly unusual for a tax-exempt organization to report deferred revenue on its $990, and even more rare to do it year after year. This typically only happens when the organization receives a conditional grant, which is also uncommon. Oddly enough, One Love Global did not return requests for comment. But I found this little part interesting here. Some video that was shot by Patrice Colliers of herself and Abdullah drinking wine and reflecting on the George Floyd riots. Abdullah was railing against disgruntled activists in the press for demanding transparency of the finances. This is what she said. Who the fuck are you? You ain't done shit. And you ain't doing no fucking work. You do no work. You're on Twitter. You have no following. They don't care. They don't care because they already know that they have this built-in requirement to love. That doesn't make any sense what I just said, did it? No. Basically what I'm saying is that no matter what they do, their supporters aren't going to turn on them. And that does sound familiar. But, one of their supposed ways that they essentially stole money. These are anti-capitalists stealing money. I don't get it. But they supposedly used a lot of these funds to go on a book writing retreat to Jamaica. And here we are, they're talking again about Abdullah, described that trip as a vacation. She mentioned that she had just come back from Jamaica for a vacation, and she went with some people with grassroots, and they were writing a book or something like that. But it was really just a vacation. Well, that's who they are, and they're not lying, because Black Lives Matter. It just happens to be it's only their lives that really matter. That's why you stand against these people. Not because of their message, but because of their actions. The fact that they're capitalizing on their own people's suffering. It's so fucking gross. All right, so the elephant in the room. Let's get to it. Babylon B, kick it off, baby. Donald Trump found guilty of being Donald Trump. Trump reminds media he prefers the term justice-impacted individual. Yeah, it's funny how the left-wing media who talk about microaggressions and labeling people with the correct names and the correct ways of saying things so not to defame them or hurt them, quickly, points out that he's a convicted felon. Using both words, convict and felon, right there, boom. It's funny, but that's their modus operandi, is that they paint Trump to be so hateable that it's okay to say nasty things that you wouldn't say to somebody else. Just ask Candace Owens how many times Democrats have called her the N-word, or how many times I've heard Democrats use the N-word. Democrats celebrate Trump being convicted of whatever it was he did. That's part of the reason why this is going to be overturned. It was muddled. Now, simply put, it was a muddled trial. I don't believe the jury really knew what it was that they were deciding. I don't know if they understood the subject. Okay, I barely understand the subject. I'd say there's a lot of it that I don't. But anyhow, enjoy your little victory. I'm sure when it's overturned, it'll just be, buried by the media. And people will refer to him as convicted, and then they're just going to, have to look at the record and go, oh, yeah, that's right, it was overturned. That's to be seen. Judge instructs jurors they need not believe Trump is guilty to convict him. And that's at the heart of all of this, is the fact that this was something where the statute of limitations had run out on the misdemeanors. The DA Bragg, that guy who's done such a wonderful job so far. Oh, wow. Reelect that dude. Oh, my goodness. He brought it up to a felony under this murky banner of that the hush money was used to pay off people for a crime of interfering with the election. Not really sure how paying a porn star to not talk about you sleeping with her is interfering with an election. That's not interfering with the election. That's not. Every politician who has even the smallest of skeletons in their closet covers it up. I mean, that's just how it is. What are politicians coming out and saying, oh, you know what? Hey, I'm going to run for, governor of such and such, and I just wanted to let you know that one time I banged an underage babysitter. No, they cover it up. They contextualize it. That's what they do, both sides, everyone. I mean, come on. We've all done it on resumes. We've all done it in our real lives. That's not interfering with an election. And I think that one of the things that was done here, especially in his instructions, was to say, let's just assume, or it's a fact that Trump committed a crime. Now let's have a trial to show whether he had sex with Stormy Daniels and paid hush money, which was not what the trial was about. But anyhow, the big problem here, Bronco really illustrating this right here, the merchant of death. Lawfare is going to be, or is, the most divisive thing I've ever seen here in America. You know, I'm fine with politicians, the old way of doing it, the quid pro quo. Whoa. Try saying that when your heart rate's at about 150 miles an hour. But, you know, if he had actually done something that was criminal, we'd be able to see it. This was nothing more than the OJ trial over and over again, where the jury took it upon themselves to make a social statement. I don't know if any of those jurors were actually impartial. The more they try to say that some of the jurors were Trump supporters, the least I believe it, the less I believe it. Deep breath. Everybody, deep breath. There we go. But they had prejudicial evidence that was allowed to go through. They didn't have to have Stormy Daniels describe the affair. They didn't have to prove that hush money was paid. Those were two things that were already a given. And it confused the jury, who like I said before, I don't think they really understood what they were there to decide. They came up with the verdict, but was that verdict that he was guilty of paying hush money? Because what it needed to be was, did he commit a second crime, or was he intending to commit another crime? And election interference, I don't see that. And then at the end, in the judge's instructions, a little more on that later, but he allowed them to choose from 3 different crimes, which again does not allow Trump to defend against those individual charges. Those charges were never proven. Simply saying that he covered up an affair with a porn star is not interfering with an election. And if you think that's interfering with an election, whoa, then just about every notable politician should be in jail. And I also really don't think that a judge who's presided over other Trump trials really needs to be involved. I think that the change of venue, the change of judge, I feel like that would have happened if this was just your run-of-the-mill average, criminal, or, an actual crime. I think that would have happened. I don't understand why it didn't. I tend to think that the Trump team sort of allowed this bullshit to happen, knowing that it was going to give them, grounds for appeal. I don't know. It's cynical. This is 3D chess. I'm not sure of that. But I believe, though, like I said before, to sum it all up, the prosecutors led the jury to believe that this was about hush money and that the second crime was already established. Even the judge called Cohen an accomplice. That's prejudicial language. That's why this is bullshit. Whether or not Trump did or didn't do it, I don't think we know. I don't see that, because I don't believe covering up an affair is an election interference. Even CNN had lawyers on who said that the instructions were flawed. So, like they said right here, whether you're driving in a Ford or a Ferrari, if somebody gives you bad directions, you're going to get lost. And those jury instructions were just take the Constitution, throw it out the window, burn it, shoot it, and hang it. And why was because the falsification of business records had to be in furtherance of some other crime. And there wasn't really great instruction on what that other crime was. And as they point out here, under New York state law, you're not required to say which crime it was. But when they do, the judge has to instruct them on that specific crime. And the problem here is that they don't have to prove that they actually committed that other crime. They don't have to prove that they actually had Federal Election Commission violations. But they have to show that what was intended to do was in fact a crime. And that was the shortfall in the instructions. Was there an attempt to cover up something that would raise to the level of election violations? Some of the supporting documents that the prosecution brought forth were from 2017. But yet they're saying this was to interfere with the 2016 election. If you rob a bank with a note and then a month later you buy a gun, are they now going to turn around and say you committed armed robbery? That's essentially what's going on here. I don't think they proved the other crime. That's it. So, as far as I was concerned, he was either going to be not guilty or guilty of the misdemeanors of falsifying these business records. But the statute of limitations had run out on the misdemeanors. And I don't think the pandemic, because knowing what we know now, that whole shutdown thing was a bunch of bullshit. I don't think that rises to the level of, well, we should give it a pass because of the pandemic. But Democrat state, Democrat governors, mayors, DAs, they conspired to bring this. They muddied the waters, and they got what they wanted. The problem is it only strengthened him. And I'll tell you why. Because even if he is guilty of all this stuff, saying stupid things, banging porn stars, all of that, it don't matter. Because our border is wide open. And that alone is causing untold damage for decades. The establishment of 2 violent Venezuelan drug gangs. Tourist burglaries where they fly into the country or they walk into the country, steal shit and send it back home. That's all under Biden's watch. We can argue about inflation. We can argue about home prices. We can argue about all of these different things. And we could say maybe some of it was Trump's fault, maybe some of it was Biden's fault. But the open border is Biden and his side's fault. Republicans are not declaring their cities sanctuary cities. All right? They're not. They're not giving in to these people's demands. They're not finding fresh, culturally appropriate ingredients. This is Biden's problem. And the only thing that could possibly fix the border and maybe get some of these bad actors out of the country again would be Republicans and Trump. I'm sorry, that's just what it is. 30,000 Chinese nationals, people from all over the world with all different kinds of motivation. I used to think maybe 10% were bad. I'm starting to think that it's well over 30 to 40% are just people coming here to take what they can get or to set up criminal empires. Moving on. Really quick here. Quiet part out loud. Activist admits goal of violent protest. This person, Das, whatever the fuck your name is, says, so what students have learned in this moment is how to exist on their campus in disruptive ways, how to build revolutionary power, and how to utilize leverage points, which forces universities to meet their demands. Wow. And y'all were worried about an insurrection on January 6th. Wow. It's scripted. That's what it is. I mean, I watch a lot of these videos where they try to interview people at these protests, and they literally say, if you have any questions, ask the organizers. So they don't even know. They're so passionate that they're going to go out and take over their campus buildings, but they're not going to say what it is. They're going to defer to the organizers. Doesn't sound like real passion to me. Do I sound like I have passion when I talk about things? Think about this. Do I defer to something else? No, I find shit, I bring it to you, and I get pissed off to the point where I barely even talk because I believe in that. These people don't believe in it, man. They're being molded. Whatever. And amongst all of that, this comes up. LGBT people don't feel safe in Muslim-led city that ban pride flags. Yeah. Ham, Michigan there elected a Muslim majority council in 2015. But last year, the city council unanimously voted to pass legislation banning pride flags. Let's see what happens this June here. You're supporting people who are opposed to you because your counterparts really don't trust these people. Oh, okay, so in the wake of the terrorist attacks and some of that kind of stuff, we banned flights from certain countries, and that was done by Republicans. So therefore, we must like the Muslims, and we're going to do it. I have no problem with people who are Muslim. I have problems with these large radicalized groups, and how many of them are here now? We don't know. They just walk across the border. They just walk across the border. That's it. All you have to do is smuggle the weapons in now. But the people, the manpower, can just walk across the border. And that's all on Biden. There is nothing that connects our current border crisis to any former president. Okay? This isn't even Obama's fault. This is right at Biden went in, executive orders, undid everything that was in place. Kicked it open. Which brings me, happily, as I skip through all these articles that maybe I'll bring you next week, because they were interesting, but boy, did this week blow up, didn't it? Anyhow, meanwhile, back in the basement, there's Biden getting his bubble wrap on, surrounded by the lawfare and all the tricks that he's going to bring forth. I mean, you want to talk about election interference? That trial was election interference. It really was, because you were going directly after a candidate. This wasn't Biden trying to cover up that he had slept with a male hooker. No. This was going after a political candidate. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to duck and dodge. He's going to continually have predetermined, spontaneous questions. They're doing everything in their power. And you know why they're doing everything in their power? Because this guy is a sheep. He is a career politician and an old white guy who is not acting like a career politician or an old white guy. He's simply doing what the neo-Marxists want. And that's why, whether or not it's overturned or not, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit that Trump was convicted. Wow, okay, so I like Trump less as a person. I don't like him as a person. I don't think he'd like me. I think he'd have a real problem with people like me. All right? I don't care. Because what Biden has done and what Democrats across this great nation have done is undermine America. Undermine the things that make us great. In the name of diversity, equity, inclusion, and all that bullshit. All of their stupid decisions. Making female prison guards search male prisoners because that male decides, I'm a woman. And we just all fall in line with that. Open up the border. Hey, I'm sure they all need amnesty. Right, okay. As the Venezuelan gang members are walking across. And we damn well know it. And when we needed unity, all we got was more division. A couple weeks ago, he was giving a commencement speech. Looked out on a black audience and said, I don't know how you love America when they don't love you. That's fucking division. That's not where we're at. That's why this guy has to go. Make no bones about it. I wish we had a purple candidate. I wish we had a third party right now. I'm just a dude in his bunker, basically. I don't have the resources or the connections to get something going. I wish I do. I'm working towards it. But why didn't anybody swoop in? Why is there no purple party out there right now? Why is it that our best choice is Donald Trump? I don't know, man. I don't know. But I know where I'm going. And quite frankly, the jury decision only emboldened that in me. We have a fight on our hands right now. 4 more years of what we've seen over the last 4 years is going to be a disaster of titanic proportions. I'm the king of the world. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Love yourself. Drink your water. Don't be stupid. Hug your mom and dad. And you know what? When you're feeling blue, do what I do. Dance it out.